Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. What if I told you that the most powerful nations on Earth, the ones who have dictated world order for centuries, are slowly but surely realizing that their greatest challenge is not Russia, not China, not terrorism, and not even economic collapse? What if I told you that behind the noise of global conflicts, diplomatic tensions, and economic battles, there is a silent yet unstoppable force rising, and that force is India? Yes, you heard that right. Today we are going to explore why India, once seen as a developing country struggling with poverty and colonial scars, has now become the world's biggest fear. Not because India threatens others with brute force or imperialist ambitions, but because India is reshaping the very foundation of global power in ways the world did not anticipate. For centuries, the narrative was clear. The West would dominate technologically, economically, and militarily. China would grow fast, Russia would remain a military powerhouse, and the rest of the global South would follow. But India has disrupted this pattern, quietly, strategically, and powerfully. And that's exactly what makes India's rise so intimidating. Because while the world was watching China's Belt and Road, while the West was focused on Russia's military campaigns, India was building something far more dangerous to the existing order: independence, resilience, and influence. So let us dive deep, piece by piece, to understand why the world is now quietly and sometimes openly afraid of India's rise. First, let's begin with the sheer scale of India's population and demographics. India is now the world's most populous country, surpassing China with over 1.4 billion people. But this isn't just about size, it's about age. While most Western countries and even China face aging populations, India's average age hovers around 28 years. That means India's workforce is young, energetic, adaptable, and ready to take over industries that demand innovation, labor, and creativity. Think about this. The United States, Japan, Germany, even China are all facing a ticking demographic time bomb. Their working age populations are shrinking. Social welfare burdens are rising. But India stands as the opposite. An endless supply of skilled youth, engineers, doctors, coders, entrepreneurs. That demographic edge is something no other major nation currently possesses. And here lies the fear. Imagine what happens when this youthful workforce combines with cutting-edge technology, growing industries, and global networks. The answer is simple. India doesn't just compete, it dominates. Second, we cannot ignore the economic transformation. For decades, India was seen as a nation of potential but never performance. Bureaucracy, corruption, and poverty were labels attached to its name. But now things are different. India is the fastest growing major economy in the world, with consistent GDP growth that leaves the West nervous. Look at the numbers. India has already surpassed the UK to become the fifth largest economy. It's projected to overtake Germany and Japan in the coming years, making it the third largest economy after the US and China. But what scares the West isn't just growth, it's sustainability. While other economies grow fast but collapse during crises, India has shown resilience. During COVID-19, when the world's economies crumbled, India was among the first to recover and bounce back. Foreign investors are pouring in, manufacturing is shifting from China to India, digital payment systems like UPI are revolutionizing the financial sector globally, and India's economic policies are designed not just for short-term gains but for long-term dominance. Now imagine this combination: a young population plus an unstoppable economy. That right there is one of the biggest reasons India has become the world's fear. But here comes the third and perhaps the most underestimated reason: India's technological and digital supremacy. The world often talks about Silicon Valley in the United States or Shenzhen in China, but did you know that India has quietly built one of the most powerful digital ecosystems in the world? Take digital payments. India's UPI system isn't just advanced, it's unmatched. The volume of digital transactions India handles in a single year outpaces entire continents. And this is not just for urban elites, this is for villagers, farmers, rickshaw drivers. India has democratized technology in a way no other country has. Then look at artificial intelligence, space research, cybersecurity, and startups. India is producing more tech unicorns than ever before. Indian scientists and engineers are not just contributing, they are leading. From NASA to Google, from Microsoft to IBM, Indians are running the very companies that shape the future. And when India lands on the moon's south pole, or launches satellites at record-breaking costs, the world is forced to rethink its assumptions. How can a nation once dismissed as poor now compete at the highest levels of science and technology? The answer terrifies them, because if India can achieve this now, Imagine what it can do in the next 2 decades. But friends, it doesn't end with economics and technology. Let's talk about the geopolitical shift. For too long, the world was shaped by Western alliances. NATO, the EU, G7, or by Eastern power blocs led by China and Russia. But India refuses to be boxed into anyone's camp. India plays its own game. India is a founding member of BRICS, strengthening economic ties with Russia and China. At the same time, it is part of the Quad alliance with the US, Japan, and Australia, countering Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. India buys oil from Russia despite Western sanctions, while simultaneously signing defense deals with the US and France. This independence terrifies the West. Why? Because it means India cannot be controlled. Unlike allies who follow instructions, India charts its own path. When the US pressures nations to cut ties with Russia, India increases trade. When Europe debates banning Huawei, India builds its own 5G. When China tries to dominate Asia, India strengthens its military at the borders. In other words, India is unpredictable, unshakable, and unaligned. This is a nightmare for global powers used to manipulating smaller nations. The Indian armed forces are among the largest in the world, with nuclear weapons, advanced missiles, and a rapidly modernizing Navy and Air Force. India is no longer just a regional power, it's a global force. Consider this. India is one of the world's top defense spenders. It develops its own fighter jets, its own missile systems, its own aircraft carriers. At the same time, it collaborates with Russia, the US, Israel, and France for advanced weaponry. This makes India's military both self-reliant and globally integrated. But here's what makes India unique. It doesn't invade or colonize. It doesn't threaten for the sake of domination. Its military doctrine is defensive but decisive. And that balance, having immense power without reckless aggression, is what makes others nervous. Because no one knows when India might decide to fully unleash its capabilities if provoked. Now let's dive into soft power, something rarely acknowledged but incredibly powerful. India's culture, traditions, and values have spread across the globe. Yoga, Bollywood, Indian cuisine, spirituality, and even philosophy, these aren't just entertainment or hobbies, they shape global lifestyles. Indian diaspora communities are among the most influential in the world, whether it's doctors in the UK, engineers in the US, or entrepreneurs in Africa. Indians abroad are creating influence everywhere. And this influence isn't loud or forceful, it's subtle, persuasive, and long-lasting. This kind of power is terrifying because it's unstoppable. You can sanction oil, you can ban companies, but you cannot ban yoga, food, or culture. India's soft power is like water, it seeps everywhere and no wall can stop it. Why does the world fear India? It's not just about power, economy, or military, it's about mindset. India is no longer apologetic. Gone are the days when India bowed its head to Western pressure. Gone are the days when India was called a third world country. Today, India stands tall, confident, and assertive. India negotiates on equal terms with the US, China, Russia, and Europe. It does not hesitate to reject unfair deals. It speaks its mind on global platforms like the UN. It pushes back when criticized. And that confidence is unnerving for nations who were used to seeing India as submissive. The psychological shift is as important as the economic or military one. But once a nation starts believing in its own power, the world has no choice but to accept it. My friends, I could go on, but this is only the beginning of our journey into understanding why India has become the world's biggest fear. In part 2, we will dive even deeper, examining India's role in global trade, its environmental policies, its digital sovereignty, and the potential scenarios that terrify policymakers in Washington, Beijing, and Brussels. But one thing is clear already. India's rise is not a threat in the traditional sense. India doesn't seek to dominate or enslave. Its rise is a threat because it represents something far more dangerous to the old order: freedom, independence, and an alternative way of being powerful without bowing down. And that is what truly makes India the world's biggest fear. What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, the greatest fear haunting the corridors of power in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, Brussels, and every global capital is not nuclear war, not economic collapse, not climate change, and not terrorism, but something far more subtle, far more unstoppable, and far more underestimated. What if I told you that the world's biggest fear today is India? Yes, India, the nation once mocked for poverty, once dismissed as a follower, once chained by colonialism, is now emerging as the very force shaking the foundations of global order. And here's the suspense. It's not because India is threatening war, not because it wants to colonize, and not because it seeks revenge. The fear of India lies in something far deeper. India is rewriting the rules of power itself. It's rising in silence, but its impact is so loud that even superpowers cannot ignore it. And that's why today we are going to take you on a journey to uncover exactly why India has become the world's biggest fear. And here's the scary part. This isn't just about numbers. A young population is not just workers. It is ambition, energy, and creativity unleashed. It is millions of minds ready to innovate, to disrupt, to build, to compete. When the West looks at India's demographic dividend, it doesn't just see opportunity, it sees competition. It sees challenge. It sees a rival future. Because if India mobilizes this young force, no economy, no tech hub, no global giant will be able to compete. That, my friends, is fear number one. Now let's talk money, because power without wealth is just an illusion. For decades, India was described as the land of potential. Potential meant promise without performance. But today, India is no longer just potential, it's performance, it's power, it's progress. India has already overtaken the UK, the very empire that once colonized it, to become the fifth largest economy in the world. And here's the prediction that keeps Western economists awake at night. Within the next decade, India is expected to overtake both Germany and Japan to become the third largest economy on the planet, behind only the US and China. But it doesn't stop there. What terrifies the world is the resilience of India's growth. Unlike economies that rise fast and collapse faster, India has shown something rare: stability. When COVID-19 devastated the global economy, when supply chains broke, when oil prices spiked, India didn't crumble. It adapted, it recovered, and it bounced back stronger. In fact, India became one of the first major economies to return to growth. Investors noticed, global corporations noticed, and slowly manufacturing is shifting from China to India. Supply chains are being restructured around India. Billion-dollar investments are flowing into Indian startups, industries, and infrastructure. But let me tell you what really stings the superpowers. India is not copying anyone. It's creating its own path. Take digital finance. India's UPI system is not just advanced. It's revolutionary. In 1 year, India processes more digital transactions than the US, Europe, and China combined. Think about that. A farmer in a remote village, a rickshaw driver in Delhi, a student in Bangalore. All of them are part of a digital ecosystem so efficient that even the World Bank admits it's the future. The fear: if India's model spreads worldwide, Western financial systems could lose their dominance. And then comes technology, the new battlefield of the 21st century. The US had Silicon Valley, China had Shenzhen, but now the world is realizing that India's building something even bigger. From artificial intelligence to space research, from quantum computing to cybersecurity, India is not just participating, it is excelling. Who launched one of the cheapest missions to Mars in human history? India. Who became the first to land on the unexplored south pole of the moon? India. Who is providing engineers, scientists, and CEOs to companies like Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM, and NASA? India. This is what terrifies global powers. India has become the brain of the world. Its talent is everywhere. Indians are not just working in technology. They are leading it. And here lies the unspoken fear: when the brain of the world belongs to India, who will really control the future? But technology and economy are not the only weapons in India's arsenal. Let's talk about power politics, because in a world dominated by alliances, India is the one country no one can control. Think about it. When the US wanted India to cut ties with Russia after the Ukraine war, what did India do? It increased trade with Russia. When China tried to expand influence in Asia, what did India do? It strengthened military presence at its borders. When Europe debated banning Huawei, what did India do? It built its own 5G ecosystem. India sits in BRICS alongside Russia and China, challenging Western financial dominance. But at the same time, India is a member of the Quad with the US, Japan, and Australia, countering China in the Indo-Pacific. India buys weapons from Russia, drones from the US, missiles from Israel, and fighter jets from France, while also developing its own defense industry. Do you see the pattern? India is everywhere, but India belongs to no one. It is not Washington's puppet. It is not Moscow's ally. It is not Beijing's follower. It plays its own game, and it plays it well. And that is what terrifies the world. Because an independent India is unpredictable, it cannot be bullied, sanctioned, or blackmailed. When oil prices rise, India negotiates. When vaccines are needed, India manufactures. When trade routes are blocked, India finds alternatives. It's like trying to hold water in your hand. You simply can't. Now let's address the subject no one dares to underestimate. India's military. The Indian armed forces are not just one of the largest in the world. They are among the most capable, with over 1 million active personnel, a nuclear arsenal, advanced missile systems, and a rapidly growing Navy and Air Force. India is no longer just a regional power. It is a global force. Here's what makes India even more formidable. Its military doctrine. India does not believe in reckless aggression. It doesn't invade for resources. It doesn't colonize for power. But when provoked, it responds with precision and strength. Remember, when terrorists attacked Pulwama, India didn't just condemn, it crossed the border, struck deep into enemy territory, and came back victorious. That sent a clear message. India may be peaceful, but it is not weak. And then there is self-reliance. India is building its own fighter jets like the Tejas, its own aircraft carriers like INS Vikrant, its own nuclear submarines, and its own hypersonic missiles. It is one of the few nations in the world with a nuclear triad. The ability to strike back from land, air, and sea. This is not just defense, it is deterrence. And deterrence creates fear. But my friends, power is not only about hard strength. There is something far more influential, soft power. And this is where India plays the game like no one else. Think about it. Yoga, Bollywood, Indian cuisine, Ayurveda, spirituality, these are not just cultural exports. These are ideas, lifestyles, and philosophies that have seeped into the daily lives of millions across the globe. From New York to Tokyo, from London to Cape Town. You will find yoga studios, Bollywood fans, Indian restaurants, and spiritual retreats. Now imagine this. While America influences with Hollywood and China with money, India influences with culture and tradition. And here's the thing, culture cannot be sanctioned. You can ban trade, but you can't ban food. You can stop oil, but you can't stop music. You can block weapons, but you can't block yoga. India's soft power is invisible, yet unstoppable. And that is terrifying because it means India is not just a country, it is an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. And finally, let us touch the psychological factor. This is where the fear of India becomes the deepest. For centuries, India was ruled, looted, divided, and dismissed. But today, the mindset has changed. India no longer bows. India no longer apologizes. India no longer accepts being second. It negotiates on equal terms with America, with China, with Europe, with anyone. It rejects unfair deals. It challenges narratives. It stands tall. That confidence is new, and it is powerful. Because when a nation believes in itself, the world has no choice but to respect it. India is not demanding respect, it is commanding it. And that shift from apologetic to assertive is perhaps the greatest fear of all. So here we are at the end of part 1 of this journey. We have uncovered how India's demographics, economy, technology, politics, military, culture, and mindset are shaping a new world. But this is only the beginning. In part 2, we will go even deeper. We will explore how India is reshaping trade, how its green energy revolution is changing the planet, how its digital sovereignty is challenging Silicon Valley, and what the future scenarios are that keep policymakers in Washington, Beijing, and Brussels awake at night. Because one truth is becoming clearer every day. India is not just rising, it is redefining power. And that, my friends, is why India has become the world's biggest fear.